Gear building, you know he's on top. Million subs, he never gonna flop. Out of Chicago, where the streets don't sleep. Betting on games, making cash real deep. Crystal ball for sports, he knows the lines. He's a sports aficionado, the money he finds. From football to basketball, he's always on point. Predicting winners never disappoints. He's got that hustle, that Chicago vibe. Making moves on the streets, cash on the side. With E, you know it's always a bet. He's the king of the game, never forget.
Hello and welcome to the Etoft21sports Show for August 20th. How is everyone doing? My name is Erik. I'm the man behind Etoft21sports. Absolutely loaded episode for you today. My boy Okane from the Lockdown Podcast, he's coming on. Him and I are going to talk the AFC North. Gino's going to have his horse racing by the day from Saratoga, Travers Day this weekend on Saturday. Absolutely loaded card. But before we get into that, I need to talk about my boy Jerome Ford. Right now, he's an ADP of 122, running back 41. He is in the fantasy football spotlight. And look, I love Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is probably my favorite player in the NFL. But let's face it, last year's knee injury was a second serious knee injury. And he's not going to be able to be the cowbell back that he has been in years. And the facts are he's probably not even going to be ready at the beginning of next season. All these fantasy football experts, none of them are making the case for Ford. He wasn't the starter to start the season last year, split the backfield, and he still finished as RB16. He was a top 20 running back, and he was a backup to start the season. And for whatever reason, he was splitting work with Kareem Hunt. Now, Kareem Hunt is gone. He's going to start the season as the lead back. And his competition is coming off his second major knee injury, and he's going to be running behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. When we look at running backs in the Stefanski system, this is where they finished: 16, 6, 13, 10, and 11 with Hunt and Chubb when they were both 4 years ago, first year in Stefanski's system. Backs produce. The uncertainty of Chubb. Drafting Ford in the 10th round is insane value. And if he's on the board and you're not drafting him, you are completely missing out. And let's face it, Ford is going to be a lead winner this year in fantasy football. That is why Jerome Ford is in the fantasy football spotlight. Now let's shift our attention over to Saratoga and Travers Day with our boy Gino from the That's What G Said podcast.
It's a big week of racing coming up at Saratoga. The Travers is on Saturday. 5 Grade 1 races all in a row. That ends with the Grade 1 Travers, race number 13. Remember to head to drf.com if you need any help when you want to do your research before you bet the races. drf.com. So you'll know a lot of the names of these horses in here. Torpedo Anna, she's the filly. She's going to be facing the boys. She's won 4 in a row. She's awesome. She's the best of the fillies, of the girls. Then familiar names like Sierra Leone, who was the runner-up in the Kentucky Derby and who was 3rd in the Belmont. Unmatched Wisdom is an undefeated horse who's super interesting. You have Dornick, who won the Belmont and who won the Haskell. Then you have Fierceness, who we remember, who was your Florida Derby winner and recently won the Jim Dandy. I think there's a good amount of speed in here because you have Fierceness, you have Dornick. They both want to be forwardly placed. Batten Down, he wants to go to the lead also. So does Unmatched Wisdom. I don't think he wants to be too far out of it. And with Torpedo Anna drawing the inside, I think she's probably going to have to go a little bit faster than she would like to. So I'm expecting Torpedo Anna, Unmatched Wisdom, Batten Down, Dornick, Fierceness, all to be forwardly placed. I'm looking for horses to come from off the pace. I think Sierra Leone will run well in here, but the one that's really interesting to me is actually the number 4, Corporate Power. He's not quite as proven, and he may not be as talented as most of this group, but he could just get a fantastic trip because those horses that I mentioned that might all be showing speed, Fierceness, Dornick, Batten Down, Unmatched Wisdom, and Torpedo Anna, he might be able to sit right behind those horses and then right in front of Sierra Leone and Anna Marie, the horses who really want to be coming from way out of it. I think Corporate Power should get a great trip in here and have an opportunity to outrun his odds. So the horses who I'll be using on all of the exotics, Sierra Leone, Corporate Power, and Dornick, kind of my top 3. in the Travers, but let's take a little bit of a swing with the number 4, Corporate Power, 15-1 on the morning line. Good luck on Saturday at Saratoga.
Make sure to give my boy Gino a follow at It's Me Gino B. I am going to be on his podcast. I'm not going to be on it this week, but I'll be back on it next week talking some NFC East. Now let's welcome this week's guest, my boy, all the way up from northern Wisconsin, Okane. How you doing today, my man?
Howdy. Good to be back.
Dude, it's been a while, man. Haven't had a chance to talk. I mean, obviously, first thing, disappointment by our Red Wings. One game away from making it. Disappointment from our Bucks.
Yeah, it was not a good summer. My summer started early with the Red Wings not making it and the Bucks bowing out early. So I'm ready to start cheering for some meaningful sports. I'm ready for fall. The Brewers have been great, but baseball is baseball.
Baseball is baseball. That is right. You did your college football preview show earlier today. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find that online and everything?
Yeah. So we post on, so it's called Lock Talk Podcast with me and my buddy Joey. Joey's from New York. He's a Penn State fan. So we went through, you can find it on my Twitter or X at _Okane _ Lock Talk Pod on YouTube as well. But yeah, we went through just about everything today. There's a lot of turnover in college football these days. So this was kind of a deep dive to get people ready because, Erik, we got college football this weekend.
I know, which is absolutely insane. You will never guess where I was earlier this afternoon, my friend.
Earlier this afternoon. That's a great question. Where were you?
I was on the sidelines during the Central Michigan University's practice.
How was that? And how did you end up doing that?
You literally, I'm visiting my parents right now. They live in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, home of the Chippewas. I grew up in the shadows of Kelly Short Stadium. And they just practice out in the open. They don't close it off. You can literally just go right there. If you break out your cell phone, someone comes over and tells you to put it away. But it's literally just open to everybody, which is absolutely insane when you think about it.
Hell yeah, fire up chips. Where are they going to be in the MAC this year? Are they going to be kind of in the middle again?
I'll tell you what, I have them finishing toward the top quarter. I actually had Western Michigan winning it. I think Western Michigan is going to be a little sneaky under the radar team in the MAC and everything. Miami, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about this, but anytime you have that quarterback who's supposed to be the quote unquote star in one of those lower level, like group of 5 conferences, group of 4, and they enter the portal and then they come back, that's like a little mini red flag to me.
It's a huge red flag to me.
Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things where I'm not on them. Toledo's losing a lot. Cool Kev is in the chat room. What is up, my friend? There's a ton of horses in the Travers. I'll be honest, I haven't even looked. I will probably bet on it just because I'm a degenerate gambler like the most people watching this. But I think it's like the fourth biggest purse in North America for horse racing. Dude, no sleep this time of the year, my friend Bobby. We're here to preview the North. Let's jump right into it. The first team we're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. All these were per DraftKings, so Okane may have some different lines, but he's going to share some futures. Super Bowl.
Mine are DraftKings as well, so you're good.
Super Bowl 13-1, AFC 7-1 to win the North plus 140. Make the playoffs. Yes, minus 260. No, plus 205. Over under 10.5. Talk to me about the Slim Shady Bengals, my man.
Yeah, I like what the Bengals did. Obviously, their biggest issue last year was Joe not being healthy, mixed with one of the worst defenses in the league. They gave up over 6,000 yards. It was a shit show, so they needed to get better. Picked up Sheldon Rankins. I like him. He's replacing DJ Reader. Also in the defensive backfield, to get Geno Stone as well as Von Bell back. So they did fill in some gaps. Drafted a pair of defensive tackles in the second and third round, so they'll get some better depth. But this team goes as far as Joe Burrow takes them. I like Joe Burrow as long as he's healthy. This is a team that's, if there's another team that's going to push the Ravens rather in this division, it's going to be the Bengals, in my opinion.
The first thing about the Bengals that kind of like stood out to me when I was looking at this, ever since Zach Taylor came on board, they have had the same coaching staff. Like no one has moved. Now, obviously, Callahan, the offensive coordinator, is gone. He went down to Tennessee. And he took some coaches with him. Now we're starting to see, dare I say, some cracks in the foundation. Hendricks complaining about a new contract. Jamar Chase, not at camp, wants a new contract. They've been so solid for like years. Couple assistant coaches leave. Could we see like some cracks behind closed doors, so to speak?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anytime you have a team that went to a Super Bowl 2 years ago, really hasn't gotten close to it back. And again, part of it has to do with health, but it's the NFL. You play with the cards that you're dealt. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and how long Zach Taylor, how long of a leash he has with just a Super Bowl appearance. We've seen coaches lose jobs pretty quickly. So it's definitely go time. If you're Cincinnati, obviously Joe is relatively young, but like you said, Chase wants a contract. Hendricks wants a contract.
Higgins wants
those players on the field. Higgins wants a contract. All these guys got to get paid. And you also got to try to solidify an offensive line to protect Burrow. It's going to be tough, and you're in one of the, if not the most competitive division in football. So, yeah, I could absolutely see cracks happening. I don't think it's going to completely fall apart, but a 9-8 season is not completely unfathomable with this group.
Offense is simple. They use short passes to set up the run and the deep shots. Interesting stat here. Bengals were 5th in yards after the catch last season. Not throwing the ball downfield as much as people think. I'm not going to lie. I didn't do the splits between Burrow versus Browning. Maybe a lot of that's Browning. I don't know. Just a stat I kind of looked at that kind of stood out to me. Mixon 5th in rush attempts and 8th in rushing yards. But the Bengals were only 30th in rush attempts and 31st in rushing yards. So I really think this is kind of lining up for Zach Moss to be a stud in fantasy football. Chase Brown got hurt. I mean, dare I say 9th, 8th round, and you and I are going to be in a guillotine league together. I don't even know if I should be sharing this with you. I'm going to be looking to draft Zach Moss. Is Zach Moss going to be on your fantasy football list to try to snipe?
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of offense where, like you said, it's West Coast, and the quarterback coach, escaping on the name, is their new offensive coordinator. He's a West Coast guy. Nothing's going to change as far as their scheme is concerned. And having a West Coast running back that he hasn't really done a bunch out of the backfield. He had 27 receptions last year, so nothing insane, but he also played in a little bit of a dysfunctional offense in Indianapolis. So I don't know how much you can read into that. But yeah, he's absolutely a guy that needs to be on your radar. Like you said, I hate moving on from Mixon, but Mixon, he was kind of getting to the point where a lot of these running backs are. Do you break down and pay your running backs, or do you go to the next cheapest option? Because the nice thing for the Bengals is they signed all these guys on 2-year deals, which I think 2-year deals is one of the best. Obviously, 1-year deal, nobody feels comfortable. 2-year deal, at least a little bit of buy-in from the player. So, yeah, I think he's a great option if you're, like you said, in that 9-10 round area.
You mentioned Burrow. Obviously, the main thing with him is, can he stay healthy? Now, let's look at it. He's lost in the Super Bowl, lost in the AFC Championship game. The other 2 seasons he's played, he hasn't made it past the 10th game of the season. So when he's there, they're making a run. If he can stay healthy, if he can't stay healthy, they're really going to struggle. Jamar Chase, top guy on my fantasy board. Games that Burrow starts, Chase is averaging 9.6 targets, 6.2 receptions, 87 yards with 19.5 fantasy points per game. Guy is an absolute monster. Those two have a insane connection. But here's my thing. The squeaky wheel gets the ball. This is T. Higgins' last year. Are we going to see Joe Burrow, you think, force the ball to T. Higgins a little bit more than he has in the past because of Higgins being upset? Is Burrow going to go out of his way to make him feel, hey, I need to come back here because this is my best shot of winning a ship? Or it just is what it is?
Yeah, I mean, you have a guy like Jamar Chase. You hope that Higgins is like you said, the squeaky wheel, especially when you're talking about receivers. They're some of the squeakiest wheels in all of sports, especially when it's time to get paid. I do like Jamar Chase a lot. Two of the bets that I really do like with the Bengals actually both concern him. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic to see what Higgins is like in a contract year. I think you pencil them both in for catching 100 balls plus this season. If obviously everybody stays healthy, that'll be the big thing. But I do think one guy that could take some of those targets away, and they picked up, is Mike Gesicki. I think Gesicki is going to be. He was very underutilized in New England. I think he could get back to his 700-yard, 5-6 touchdown form. But they also got a rookie, Jermaine Burton, that they took in the third round. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the target share is like in Cincinnati, right? We haven't really seen a full healthy Burrow in the last few years to know what that looks like.
Offensive line, what is that going to look like? You got Orlando Brown, Trent Brown had his worst season as a pro. Orlando and Trent Brown, both had their worst season as a pro. Are they going to bounce back? I was a little confused about the Mims pick. Look, he has potential, but he hasn't played enough games. You're in a win now mode. Why are you drafting someone like Mims who could be good, but we don't know this? It's just a question mark. We really don't know what we're going to get, and the pressure is going to be on them to protect Burrow. You mentioned their defense. They dropped 7 in a coverage, but the issue is which 7 are dropping the coverage. Their defensive coordinator, whose name I cannot pronounce at all, is insanely good at disguising coverages. Only rushes 4, hates the blitz, always is dropping 7. You mentioned Reader, and I really think that's the key to the defense is he was so good stopping the run. Can his replacement do that? You know what I mean? I really think like a lot of the pressure is going to, and I'm spacing on his name, I'm sorry.
Rankins.
Is going to be on him to plug that hole.
And he's more of a pass rusher. I mean, he had 11 sacks last year. He is far more of a pass rusher. But in this division, when you're facing a team like Baltimore, who is going to pound the rock, especially late in the season, it's tough to lose a guy like DJ Reader in the AFC North.
And, we mentioned Hendricks, 17.5 sacks last season, has averaged 14 sacks a season in his 3 years with the Bengals. Is he going to have another stellar season? You know what I mean? Because he's getting up there in age. Is his motor going to drop? That's a big thing. Also, safety play has been absolutely brutal. The key to this defense of Armando's, I think that's how you pronounce it, is what the DBs do. You need to have good safeties. He's had awful safeties after they lost Bates. Safety upgrade this year in the draft and free agency is a lot better. Look, I did it. This is the only guy still playing in the league that has beat Patrick Mahomes to go to the Super Bowl. Getting 13-1. They have a last place schedule. At this big of a number, I'm going to be easy to hedge out of it once it comes playoff time. So I did the Bengals 13-1, and I'm interested in Zach Moss and Jamar Chase in fantasy.
Yeah, my bets for the two that stood out to me, I like Jamar Chase most receiving yards, plus 900. Dude had over 1,200 last season with a banged up Burrow, and Jake Browning had over 1,400 when Burrow was fully healthy in 21. And then the other one I like, kind of a cheeky bet, Jamar Chase to have a 200-yard game, plus 300. Did it in both 21 and 22. So I think that's a pretty solid odds going 200 plus.
So I'm going to tell my Bengals story real quick. And I don't know if you know this. I always do the Circus Survivor. Last year, I got down to the final 56, and I start racing through my head. And one of my angles is always back the team after their coach gets fired. So I was going to take Tampa that week over the Panthers. The Panthers fired Frank Reich. So then I changed it at the very last minute to the Jaguars beating the Bengals in that Monday night game. That's the game Lawrence got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Browning knocked me out of my chances to be a millionaire. So, you know what? I'm not the biggest Browning fan. But let me ask you this. Why didn't more teams go after, like, if I'm the Raiders, would you rather have Gardner Minshew or Jake Browning?
I mean, you look at a few guys. I mean, Jake Browning is a guy. Joe Flacco is going to be sitting as a backup in Indianapolis. There are, Josh Dobbs caught on at a few different places last year. But yes, we will have once again Gardner Minshew, as I'm watching actually the replay of the Dallas-Vegas game over the weekend. But yeah, quarterback play is kind of weird. It seems like a lot of guys, people aren't drinking the Kool-Aid on guys as quickly as they have in past years. You're not seeing the Matt Flynn overreaction contract after he throws 6 touchdowns against the Lions and then getting Wally pipped by Russell Wilson. So it's, definitely some more conservative takes probably when it comes to quarterbacks, especially with how many college quarterbacks are coming out. It seems just like every year there's a lot of maybe not pro-ready quarterbacks, but guys that could plug in and have a higher upside than some of these backups that have flashed in the pan a little bit.
What's Bet Openly?
That's a great question. Bet Openly is a website that I'm partnered with, not sponsored by. I don't get any money from them. It's a peer-to-peer betting website. So I live in Wisconsin, where sports gambling is not legalized. Unfortunately, we don't have retail sports books outside of the Indian tribe. So Bet Openly, peer-to-peer, basically states that I have to go onto the site, place a bet. Somebody can take my bet. So there's a whole marketplace in there, but definitely check it out, betopenly.com. It's a really cool place. The biggest thing it does, too, it cuts out the juice. So the juice, instead of being 10%, 11%, 12%, you're looking at 1% juice. So there's my little plug.
Next, we're going over to Pittsburgh. 50-1 to win the Super Bowl, to win the AFC 28-1, to win the North 8-1, to make the playoffs. Yes, plus 185. No, minus 235. Over, under 8.5. What say you about my boy Mike Tomlin?
It was one of my questions. How many years has he bought himself now? I mean, just navigating the Kenny Pickett era, being relatively competitive. In my opinion, if he can go to a playoff with Russell Wilson, he has a lifetime contract. I am getting to the point where I think he is maybe the most protected coach in all of the National Football League, because I don't think incredibly highly of him as a coach, especially a decision maker. He did bring in Arthur Smith to coach the offense, which is way better than Matt Canada. Matt Canada was terrible. But yes, Tomlin is an interesting one. And obviously with Russell Wilson now, I don't really know what to expect out of this team. Do you think Ayuk's going to be on this team come week 1?
I think Brandon Ayuk is one of the most overrated players in the NFL. I'm not a big.
I don't see the huge rage for him. I've never been a huge fan.
I'm not a huge George Pickens guy either. Like,
neither am I. I agree.
So
we agree.
I mean, in the Arthur Smith offense, it's always the tight end. So, but they didn't throw it to Kyle Pitts last year. They threw to Jonnu Smith. Historically, he's never had a split backfield. Last year, he had a split backfield with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. There's just a lot of questions this year with the Steelers. And, 17 straight winning seasons. But is this the season it kind of comes to an end? I think it possibly could be. Justin Fields. Look, I looked like a genius for like 4 years of my quarterback takes. Like, who is going to be good? Who is going to be bad? I looked like an NFL scouting genius. I thought Fields was going to be something, man. But
I still kind of do, which is probably not good.
And, you got Russell Wilson. But let's face it, like, nothing motivates people more than money. And both these guys kind of need to put up or shut up. So maybe we'll see a little bit of magic from either one of them. Arthur Smith comes in, look, basic 3-step drop, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands as quickly as possible, run a lot of RPO and play extra passing with 2 tight end sets. I know that everyone's high in Pickens. I just don't see it. I just don't know why. I would rather have Deontay Johnson. I know there was some stuff at the end of the season with him not blocking and everything. I would rather have Deontay Johnson than George Pickens. They will run the wide zone scheme. Both Harris and Warren have had success running in those. In the past, Smith has never had an RB by committee approach, had one last year. Going to be interesting to see how the snap shares break down between those two. And Smith's done some crazy shit. Who's going to be the Cordell Patterson? I guess that's the question.
Cordell Patterson's going to be the Cordell Patterson. He's on this team.
I know, but he's old as shit, though. You know what I mean?
I know, but it was one of my notes. It's like Arthur Smith literally has Cordell Patterson on this team. It's like, okay, so is he going to steal carries from Warren? Is he going to steal carries from Harris? Because I think whether for better or for worse, Arthur Smith still probably believes in Cordell Patterson a little bit. I love Cordell Patterson. I've been a huge fan of his forever. But like you said, he's getting old, especially for what he does. But yeah, no, that was one thing that I could not stop laughing when I saw the Arthur Smith Cordell Patterson pairing still.
And the one thing about Tomlin is he's just able to hold all these people together. There's so many personalities in Pittsburgh. You mentioned Kenny Pickens, Small Hands Kenneth, as I called him. He was able to win games with Kenny Pickett as his quarterback. What he's able to do and how he's able to motivate is second to none. If he gets anything out of the quarterback position, which is a big if, I mean, I think this team could be a little sneaky because when we look at their defense, you have Cam Hayward, who's an absolute stud against the run. But when he's not there, the Steelers struggle stopping it. You have TJ Watt, so you don't have to blitz as much. That allows them to drop 7 into coverage. But with no Watt, they have no pass rush. Are those two guys going to stay healthy? They bring in McQueen from the they're bringing Queen from the Ravens. I'm not really a big Queen guy. You know what I mean? I don't think he's as good as other people think he is. Porter was a stud last year, but who is the other quarterback? Wallace was brutal last year. He's gone. They brought in Cam Sutton, but Sutton has some off the field issues that he is dealing with.
He fits right in Pittsburgh.
Going to be suspended. I think they're going to struggle defending the pass, and if Watt is out and they can't get to the quarterback, he's not going to be able to band-aid that. I don't know. Tomlin, to me, this is the team that has the biggest difference between their ceiling and their floor. If I told you they win 10, 11 games, you probably wouldn't be surprised. But if I tell you they win 4 or 5, you wouldn't be surprised either.
Mm-hmm. I mean, 3 years ago, if we would have said Russell Wilson is joining Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers, it would have been the biggest move since Peyton Manning to the Broncos. Now he's playing for the veteran minimum, how quickly things have changed. My biggest thing is I look at Russell Wilson thrived but always had 2 receivers his entire career. Well, he was good. Right now, their wide receiver room, Van Jefferson, Quez Walker, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Calvin Austin III, and George Pickens. Yeah, man, it's brutal. I don't see a lot of good things for the Steelers. I couldn't even find a bet that I really liked for this team. Maybe give me their under win total, whatever it is. But yeah, I don't see good things in Steeler Nation.
Yes, Tomlin as a dog. Tomlin and Vrabel as a dog are always going to be my picks. Those guys can motivate like no other. I agree with you. No action for me pre-flop with these guys. I just don't know. I just don't know how it's going to play out in terms of fantasy. Look, if I can get Freiermuth in the 12th round, worth a flyer. But that's going to be it. We don't know what's going to happen with this Harris Warren split. Just way too many questions to get financially involved or fantasy football involved for me and this team. Next, we're going to go to Cleveland. We got the Browns at 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. AFC 22-1 to win the North, 6-1, make the playoffs, plus 145 to miss the playoffs, minus 175. Over under 8.5. What say you about the Cleveland Browns?
As long as the nasty man is still under center, I won't buy in. The defense, they lose their entire second level. Had a super thin draft. I think they drafted like 4 or like 5 guys total. They did not have many draft picks. I don't know if Amari Cooper is going to be on the team for very much longer. Chubb's coming back off of an injury. It'll be interesting to see how like Jerry Jeudy slides in. Theoretically, I mean, you could be thrown to Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman. But yeah, it's Deshaun Watson throwing them the football. I'm not very high on him as a person nor a football player. But man, the Browns are tough. I think they're a team that, again, similar to the Steelers. Would I be super surprised if I look up and they have 10, 11 wins? Probably not. And would I be equally not surprised if they win 6, 7 games? No. And yes, absolutely, the nasty man. He's I'm not a believer in the Browns. I'm interested to hear what you think.
Oh, we need to talk about the coaching things that are going on with them. They lost Callahan. He went to go coach with his son. But Dickerson, who has 20 years of experience, is taking over. They have studs across the line. So I really don't think, if their offensive line can stay healthy, I don't think losing Callahan this year is going to affect it that much. They also brought in Mike Vrabel to be a consultant. So there's two ways. There's 2 ways you can look at it. Stefanski has Vrabel to lean on, bounce ideas off. Vrabel can kind of be like the bouncing board, if you will, and kind of like help him with some in-game strategies. Flip side, though, what happens if the Browns lose 3 or 4 in a row?
And coach in the building
are going to be calling for the head to replace Vrabel. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you could like, but it's kind of, I don't want to use the term ballsy move, but it's kind of like, for a young coach, because Stefanski's still a young coach, it's kind of a ballsy move just to kind of be like, hey, I'm going to bring in this guy who's regarded as one of the better coaches in the league just to be a consultant so I can bounce ideas off of. And he's smart, knowing full well if we lose a couple games, people are going to be calling for my head. I mean, I think it's a pretty alpha move, if you will, if that makes sense.
No, and it's funny. We had a very similar conversation. Hold on, I just want to pull up. Whoops. So we had a similar conversation with Jed Fish. He is the new head coach up at Washington. He used to coach at Arizona. So Steve Belichick is their defensive coordinator. Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll have been with the team all throughout training camp. And we talked about that as well. You know, if things don't start well in Washington, now it's not like the NFL. They don't usually kick coaches down the road quite that quick. But yes, we had that conversation. And in the sake of the Browns, is it just me, or does it feel like he's built to be a Browns coach, Vrabel? I mean, Vrabel screams Browns coach. Stefanski, for as great as Stefanski's done, and in the realm of Cleveland Brown fandom, I'm sure he will always forever be the guy that brought them back to relevancy. But now you've been kind of in this little bit of purgatory the last few years where you're good, you're not great. Obviously, you have a quarterback you paid a shitload of money to that you need to really pan out. But you can also pin a lot of it on the coaching because at the same time, they haven't really progressed as a team from where they were when they just made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. Honestly, if anything, they've taken a half step back. It's hard.
And it's funny, like when we look back at things, how stuff can change. I think it was Mayfield who fumbled the ball. I forget what Browns player it was, Mayfield's rookie year. Because the Browns were winning that game in Arrowhead.
Oh, yeah.
And there was that ball that goes out of bounds, so it becomes like Browns lose the ball or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The Browns win that game, they could probably win the Super Bowl that year. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of crazy how that one little thing can change, and then does Mahomes become Mahomes, not getting that first one? I mentioned they lost Chubb. 2015, he tore his MCL, PCL, and LCL. Then last season, he tore his MCL and meniscus, then had an ACL injury, and that's all one knee. That's a lot, man. And he's 29, going to be 30. I just think Jerome Ford is going to be an absolute stud. I mentioned him earlier in the fantasy football spotlight. I'm all in on Jerome Ford, probably him in the 10th round. Deshaun Watson back from the shoulder injury, or Mr. Nasty, as you referred to him. Are we going to see the old Mr. Nasty? Sorry, the old Deshaun Watson under center? Stefanski's offense, basic run first zone offense. Use that to set up the pass. Makes sense that when Flacco came in, he was third in play action passing, but when Watson was only 12th when he played. We need to remember that in 2020, Watson was elite in play action passing. Is he going to be able to get back to that level? Browns, you mentioned their wide receiver core. Is this the best core in the league? Moore, Judy, Tillman, Amari Cooper? Like, I'm not.
It's really good.
You know what I mean? Like, they could have the best talent. You throw in Njoku. If Watson gets to 2020 level, I think this offense is going to be insane. But that's the $1 million question. Is Watson going to be able to get to that level? Usually teams have success against the wide nine system. For those watching that don't know, that's when the defensive ends are outside of the tackles, so it opens up a lot of lanes. But for whatever reason, against the Jim Schwartz defense, only 11th in rushing yards allowed. Garrett is a stud. They partnered him last year with White. I know White's a little banged up, but I think he's going to be back to start the season. Defense is built to have pressure from the outside and then just groundhog the middle and stop the run. Schwartz has developed one of the most complicated schemes in the league, especially in the back end zone. It makes it really hard for the quarterback to read the defense. Look, I look at it like this. Defense is elite. You have Myles Garrett, could be the best defensive player in the game. Could be the best offensive line in the league. Could be the best wide receiving core in the league. You have the defending coach of the year, who I got at 28-1 last year, will always have a special place in my heart. And I'm getting 40-1 on him. Like, that's worth a small pizza bet in my eyes. Like, betting a small pizza. Because if I get 2020 Deshaun Watson, this team is going to be something special. If I don't, they made the playoffs last year with Joe Flacco coming out the couch, and I can hedge off in the first round of the playoffs. I've like, in my eyes, that's how I look at it. So I put a bet on them at 40-1 to win it all.
It's steep odds. I really like the defense. I like Myles Garrett over 13.5 sacks. That's minus 110. He's had 16, 16, and 14 over the last 3 seasons. and he just continues to stay healthy, knock on wood. I do like this one too. Deshaun Watson, over 9.5 interceptions. He's thrown 9 in his 12 starts for Cleveland. So definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. I'm probably going to end up betting both of those. Might try to figure out a way that I want to get into prize picks this year with some of these long-term props. That looks fun, but I know the odds are shit, so I don't know if I want to slew into that one. So, but no, those are the two that I like. But the Browns again, like I said, I could see them winning 11 games. I could see them losing 10 games. I mean, it's hard to say.
Stefanski, first coach fired. I mean, you probably have some decent odds on that.
I can't imagine I'm sure they're great.
I mean, let me pull up their schedule real quick. Browns schedule. Here we go. So regular season, week 1, Dallas, week 2 at Jacksonville, week 3, Giants, week 4 at Raiders, week 5 at Commanders. I mean,
you got to be 3-2.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it's not a place where they can kind of fall off. Like, if
they're not gonna start 1-4.
Like if they would have started their season like with week 6 they go at Philly, Bengals at home, Ravens at home, Chargers at home. If that would be their first 4 games and they start off 0-4, then I could see it. But that start to the season you have the Giants, the Commanders. Yeah. I don't think they're going to get them there. But you know what?
Some NFC East cake.
Next one, interesting team. We're going to the Ravens to win the Super Bowl 10-1, AFC 5.5-1 to win the AFC North plus 145. Make the playoffs, yes, minus 260. To not make the playoffs, no, plus 205. Over under 10.5. And I've never, ever asked you this question. What the hell did you think of their game plan in the AFC Championship game?
So it was a team, and I always had this issue with Baltimore. Baltimore plays scared. It seems to not happen during the regular season. During the regular season, they're the big bad bully. It happens all the time. You see them come in and they'll blow the absolute doors off a much more inferior opponent. And I think adding a Derrick Henry is only going to help that. I think adding a Derrick Henry will help that in the postseason as well. But no, the AFC Championship game, we were at a golf simulator watching the AFC and NFC Championship game, and 2 really hard ones to swallow for somebody who had I did not. I had a Ravens future, and then I had the Lions, the Lions outright that week. But yeah, odd way to finish their season. I think they're going to be great this year. I don't know what you think. Lamar is apparently down to 200 pounds, which is light.
That's thin.
That's thin. He's looking to run more, but I mean, I don't know. A lot of these young quarterbacks look thin. I'll tell you what, Jordan Love looks pretty damn thin too. So I mean, it's just a slimmer quarterback. I think these days there's not as many Josh Allens rolling around out there. It's a lot more Lamar Jacksons. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see where they kind of move with the Derrick Henry acquisition and kind of how their receivers develop. But it's going to be once come playoff time, that's going to be the only thing everybody thinks about.
So I looked at it, and first of all, I went on a 15-minute rant last year. That was one of the worst offensive game plans I have ever seen in my life in the AFC Championship game. You have one of the teams that is awful, bottom 4 in the league defending the run, and Gus Edwards, who had been your bell cow pack all year, had 4 effing carries. One of the worst game plans I've ever seen. When we look at the offense, first 5 games, 21.8 points per game, 189 yards passing per game, 146 on the ground. Then after the week 5 game against the Steelers, Ravens switched their offense. They started out last year. Monken came in. They're like, look, we're going to throw the ball to the outside. We're going to push it down the field. They were struggling offensively, and they were struggling putting up numbers. Harbaugh's not a dummy. Him and Monken, he talked to Monken. He was like, look, we need to go back to what we did, running the ball. And it worked. They went after the first 5 games. They averaged 31.6 yards per game, 224 yards passing per game, and rushing yards went up to 160. The offense, throw the ball to the middle of the field, run a little bit more. This just sets up what Jackson is. Jackson cannot throw the ball to the outside. For as good as he is, that's his limitation. And if they play a team that can take away the middle of the field and take away the running lanes, Baltimore is going to be up against it. Now, they have a sneaky guy on offense that they added. And I know everyone's going to say Derrick Henry. I'm not talking Derrick Henry, my man. I am talking my boy from UNC, Walker. Walker is a true X receiver. He is someone that can go high point a ball. He is someone you can throw down the field that can stretch the field, win a one-on-one battle. He's not a small guy like Zay Jones is. I think Walker, and I wanted to find some Walker props. I think Walker is going to be a guy we sit back at the end of the season, and he's going to have 800 yards, 4 to 6 TDs. And everyone's going to be shocking, surprised how good he fits in there. You know, they brought in Henry. It's going to be tough because you got the Henry going up the middle or Lamar going outside in the RPO. How do you think that's going to affect Lamar Jackson? Like, how many yards are we going to see him decrease? How many carries at the end of the year do you see him decreasing with the addition of Henry?
Well, the biggest thing I think that Henry gives you is it should give their play action game. It should only get better, right? Teams need to respect the run. I don't know if teams really respect the run. Dobbins had some good stuff. Obviously, Gus Edwards had some good spurts as well. Derrick Henry's a different guy than both those two. Let's be honest there. He's a completely different echelon of running back. He should make things easier for Lamar Jackson. Now, how healthy is he going to be? We haven't really seen Derrick Henry in this part of his career. We saw the first few years him playing into the divisional round of the playoffs. But Derrick Henry, I mean, how old is Derrick Henry now? We're probably looking at 30 years old. I mean, we got a 30 going on 31-year-old Derrick Henry. Is he going to be able to handle a full season of carries and then be leaned on once the postseason comes? Because this is a team that theoretically, once they get to the postseason, they should average 200 yards on the ground. They absolutely should be able to do that, whether it's design runs with Lamar, obviously Derrick Henry getting carries. One way or another, it needs to be your game plan, that and play defense. The defense is going to need some retooling. We'll see how that goes. I couldn't believe we've had 17 years of Harbaugh already. It feels like
him
17
and Tomlin
years.
came at the same time.
That's insane.
Absolutely insane. Receiving game for me, look, this is all Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is the number one. I'm not a Zay Jones, Zay Flowers guy. I think to me, how can I word this without coming off like a dick? He's not a number one wide receiver. He's a slot wide receiver. I talked about how Trey Walker from UNC can go out there and high point a ball. Zay Flowers can't do that. Zay Flowers is too small to win a one-on-one battle jump ball. Offensive line, losing 3 starters. Staley hasn't been the same last couple seasons. This is the most questions that this offensive line has had. And you mentioned it, run the ball, play defense. If this offensive line takes a step backwards, I don't trust Lamar to make throws. Do you?
I don't trust him to make throws. See, that's the problem too, is I think people still why they want him. And like you said, he's not a guy that's going to throw well to the outside receivers. RPO the shit out of him. He's got an all-pro elite running back. He's got an all-pro elite tight end. You got to be able to run RPO with those three guys and just shove it down people's throats. But it is mind-numbing to watch a team like that. But yeah, if the offensive line takes a half a step back, even with Henry being that much better than the guys before him, it isn't going to matter because it all starts up front, and especially in a division where Cincinnati's got a really good defensive line, Pittsburgh's got a really good defensive line, Cleveland's got the best front seven in the league. You need to be able to control, and maybe not control, but you need to be able to compete with those defensive fronts. And right now, this is not an offensive line that's probably set up to do that. But maybe you have a few guys step up. They really, really need it.
Ravens led the league in sacks last season and only blitzed the 25th most times under McDowell, who's obviously gone or is coming in. He has stated he wants to blitz more, bring a little bit more pressure. And look, I'm always concerned when you have a young DC coming in who's never called plays before. Everyone always says how easy it is to call plays in the NFL and all this stuff. And the analogy I always give, and you know what, dude, I'm old as hell, and you may be way too young for this to remember, but there was a Sunday night game, and Kubiak from the Texans was their head coach. He was their offensive play caller as their head coach. He had it wasn't a heart attack, but he had something at the end of the first half that forced him to, with his heart, to miss the second half. And the Texans offensive coordinator that had been with Kubiak forever took over calling plays. And it was one of the worst play calling games, one of the worst play calls for a second half of football that I've ever seen. And this is someone that's been around it forever. I really don't think people, the casual fan, understands how hard it is to call plays at this level and to manage everything. I'm a little bit concerned with that. We saw how much it hurt the Eagles last year because they had two young coordinators coming in. Ravens got younger, more athletic in the back four, adding Tampa and Wiggins in the draft, which I feel is huge.
Oh, I wanted Tampa so bad in Green Bay.
Dude, that was a great pick. That was a phenomenal pick. Pressures on Simpson to slide in next to Smith at the interior linebacker position. But this is my question for you. When I look back at this, and I keep all my notes in my Google Docs, and I always kind of look back, this is, in my eyes, the Ravens team that we've had the most questions about in the last 3 to 4 years. Would it surprise you if this was the team that made the playoffs in 2023 that didn't make it in 2024?
It would shock me because I think they're flying perfectly under the radar right now. I think people aren't buying into the hype as much as we've had it in past years. I think the odds makers are. I like the Ravens to get the number 1 seed at plus 500. To me, this is perfect. Again, in the past, I think they haven't had that dominant run game that they can lean on. I think if you add that, like I said, it opens things up for Lamar Jackson. It allows them to say, okay, because in the past, it's been, all right, Lamar, go win us the football game, because you really can't rely on anybody else. There was no running back that they've had since probably Ray Rice that couldn't go out there and win a game on their own. Derrick Henry's the kind of guy that could win you a football game. That is going to be a large part of this team. I think he is probably, again, an underrated acquisition, as much of an underrated acquisition as you can get. He's probably still top 3 in most people's books. I am very, very high on the Ravens, but like we talked about, the one thing that I worry about as well is that offensive line. And the offensive line, when you have question marks there, you have question marks as a whole. So no, I absolutely see your apprehensiveness to jump on the Ravens, but I think they're kind of in a better spot. I think as a Ravens fan, they probably feel better because they don't have to worry about the hype that they have had in past years.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not betting this. Like, I'm just
Sure.
I respect Harbaugh too much. I think Harbaugh is one of the best coaches, but you kind of sit back, okay, offensive line, down a little bit. Questions at the quarterback position. Their best wide receiver, Andrews, is coming back from an injury. I don't know. Like, you just kind of play it out in your head. I could see it, but they have one of the better rest advantages. When you look at it, I was listening to, oh my God, I was reading the rest advantage thing. And there's all these teams this year that just have an awful rest advantage because of how many midweek games they're doing, especially with games on Christmas now. Somehow the Ravens escaped all that. They have one of the best rest advantages, and they're not going to be going against it. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I honestly, if I could find some Walker props, I would take a swing with Walker receiving yards over, but I couldn't find anything. So I literally did nothing with this team.
I want to keep an eye on him. I have 2 fantasy drafts this weekend. If he's available late, I may take a flyer. I'm just looking at their schedule right now. I mean, this is a team. You open up against you open up against the Chiefs in Kansas City on Thursday night. We're going to get that's going to be a hell of a game. I can't wait. We get that, and then we get Packers-Eagles on Friday night. It's just going to be a terrific first weekend of football. But then in the next 5 weeks or so, you get to see Tampa, Washington, Vegas. You sprinkle in the Cowboys and the Bills. They're non-divisional games. I mean, Denver is very winnable. The Chargers, the Giants. You're looking at a decent schedule for this team this year, surprisingly, for being a first-place schedule. But, the Browns won the division last year, no?
No, the Ravens did. The
Ravens did. Okay, yeah. I don't know why I randomly thought that. But yeah, just looking at their schedule, I think very highly of this team. But again, with an offensive line, we brought it up a lot because in college football, especially with the transfer portal, not many offensive lines stay intact. And I think that's why a lot of teams, that's why we see so much of up and downs, is because it all starts up front, man. That's one of the number one things when it comes to football. It all starts up front.
And like you mentioned it, they play the Chiefs to start the season. They play the Raiders. Raiders sneakily, with the addition of Wilkins to go along with Crosby, they have a sneakily good defensive line. Could possibly
be an easy team to put points on against. I don't know what to think about their offense with Gardner, but it's definitely not going to be a cakewalk when it comes to their defense.
Then they got the Cowboys, the Bills, the Bengals. Then it starts to loosen up on week 6 with the Commanders, Bucks. But yeah, like when you look at their schedule, if you let's just kind of look at their road games: at Houston, at the Giants, at the Chargers. I'm not going to look in division. At Tampa Bay, at Dallas, at Kansas City. I mean, that's
after Dallas. You start off with Dallas and Kansas City, and then it lightens up quite a bit.
So I mean, that's not a bad. Yeah, I mean, I want to get there, betting them not to make the playoffs, but I just, at the end of the day, I just can't do it, man. I can't do it. Okane, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday, coming on, talking some AFC North. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media and when your football work during the season will be coming out?
Yeah, man, you can follow me on X at _Okane __. And you can follow our podcast at Lock Talk Pod on we've got it on now Twitch, we've got it on YouTube, and then we've also got it on TikTok. So we're all the way across the board, but we'll be doing stuff all through the season. And then also I want to plug, I don't know what your Sundays look like during the football season. I'm sure they get plenty busy, but I will have a new project coming out called the Twitching Hour, which is going to be during the witching hour of NFL Sundays during the noon slate. I want to have guys come on, we'll sweat bets and talk about the noon games a little bit as we wrap everything up. So that'll be something that I will absolutely be inviting you to, my friend.
Look, any Sunday I have nothing going on, which is the majority of Sundays, I will be there, my friend.
Sweet.
I will be there. Just let me know. Make sure to check that out. And, we'll be back next week with our last preview of the NFC East with my boy Wade. Make sure to check that out. Make sure to give my boy Okane a follow. And we'll be back next week, boys and girls.